So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then, we can understand the time of the end. Yirmiyahu the prophet, he prophesied many years ago regarding then the coming of the Savior and also the returning of his holy cities, laid waste for many centuries. And as we read then regarding Shaliach Shaul, found then in Corinthians, there is a very specific understanding then regarding the third heaven. Previously then was explained regarding then the rewards of then the obedient people, regarding then the future. And then it was explained in a sarcastic understanding as far as the redemption of points of rewards in heaven. Because many people, they think, because they have lived some sort of a decent life, they have many points in heaven, so then they certainly have some sort of understanding as far as the redemption points of what they have done in the earth. And then, most dangerously, they do these outside of understanding of tabernacling. So then, since they've discovered there is no such situation regarding then rewards and redemption of points in heaven, because they are not going to heaven. As far as we understand from Revelation, heaven comes to the earth. If we know how to read, then we must understand. So then, what do we find in 2 Corinthians 12? There is a section of it where then Shaliach Shaul was going through some ups and downs. He was finding himself as a person in the midst of then the holy instructions as then the law, versus then the understanding of the completion of the spring feast. Shaliach Shaul was not rejecting the holy instructions. He was simply understanding the completion of half of it, and then positioning himself as the explainer of this point. And obviously he did understand then the future vengeance known as the autumn feast. But there is an instant where then he explains regarding a person he knew more than a decade ago regarding then the third heaven. Let's then try to demystify this junky understanding, because people have a tendency of having some sort of supernatural powers of understanding of heaven and so on and so forth, and then they get mixed up with observing angels, and then it goes places where then it becomes absolutely ridiculous, and then obviously defeats the purpose of understanding the holy instructions, because they get more joy and pleasure from crazy situations such as then observing angels at some form. Not even the holy prophets, most of their lives, had a chance of observing an angel in a holy temple. And can be sure of it, they were very obedient their entire lifetimes. And then many Gentiles around the world, they say they observe angels. So then we must be very cautious of what we read, and let's try to understand the content of Shaliach Shaul. He was not saying a lie, and he said himself he did not know. But he made mention of this person, more than likely crazy, explaining then what he saw in the third heaven. What goes on in the third heaven, it's not of our concern, because explains of a place where then the Creator himself has authority over. Why are we want to be involved in a situation where we have no opinion regarding it? Our objective is understanding these holy instructions and then showing other people the layers From generation, generation, and generation, there are layers. We must match them and teach them the people. And this kind of a teaching is simply mentioning. But then, let's read then what Shaliach Shaul has said. I knew a man in the Messiah some years ago, but rather in the body or rather out of the body, he did not know. So it is crazy as it is. Shaliach Shaul is simply mentioning a situation. What is the point of understanding tabernacling? There are the steps of formation. Those were very rare. Speaking of angels showing up themselves in a temple, so then the prophets had some sort of guidance of a particular understanding. Now Shaliach Shaul has mentioned, during the time of Shaliach Shaul, there were no holy cities yet. They were not yet set up. But then he mentions, he saw this person, and this person was speaking some crazy understandings of third heaven. So then, what do we read as far as Revelation? There are points and sections where then we read what goes on then during the time of the judgment or vengeance or autumn feast. But those are for reference only. Some people, they don't understand the layers of the instructions, but they want to have some sort of a point where they can explore themselves and make a name for themselves. That's where the danger then starts, because they begin to deviate from what then the Savior has said for us to do. Layering these understandings, for instance, Ezekiel explains in chapter 37 the unification of both sticks, first son, second son. Somehow, some way, at some point, at some form, both sons are and must be gathered. You find then the trade that was given then to Ishmael, later then being united with tabernacling. It will take place. As far as when and how or where, those are future events, but we know will to take place because the prophet prophesied. So then, as far as glorying himself explains the whole situation. He said then later, he was given in a thorn in the flesh, so he will not glory himself. So what is the point? They were trying to glory in themselves with some sort of a topic of their own. Shaliach Shaul, during this time, he was then positioning himself of what was as far as the Torah and instructions, and then the customs of the temple, versus then completion that had taken place. And then he was positioning himself. However, there were many other talkers of the time wanting to make a name for themselves. Why do we find so many denominations in a situation where then churches simply they do not exist? They were made it up for a specific purpose. If you have some sort of a sense of events, steps of formation in your mind, try to understand then what the Creator himself has done. He had selected Moshe, known as Moses. Then the Creator brought Moses and some of the people out of Egypt, roughly some 600,000 people, those who believed what Moses had said. And then they went to the desert. There they were then receiving holy instructions, and then they've trained for 40 years. Then they were given the land from the Euphrates to the Nile, so then they would train these holy instructions for 1,000 years. More than 1,000 years, in fact, for the coming of the Messiah. Then he came. But he came in a way not expected by the people at the time. So then, should the Hebrews at this time believe then the Savior has come? Well, of course they should believe. He truly is the hope of Israel and also the rest of the world. However, there are the steps of formation. So then, let's evaluate. Moshe went to the desert, he received the instructions, and they've trained. So then, the people, at the time, they were then the instruments, besides saving themselves, saving their souls. They would have become then the future saviors of the Gentiles via the Messiah. And then the instructions continued on until Prophet Daniel mentioned he would have a standby for 1,000 years. Then the holy cities then would return. And that's where we are at. But the danger of this time are so many talkers, so many scoundrels making a name for themselves, and they truly are deceivers. They don't understand any instructions, unfortunately. Some of these people, they are very honest. They are genuine. But they are the scoundrels. They don't understand, but they are the scoundrels. Should be given then some sort of slack because their ignorance? Absolutely. But once they know, then they should refrain themselves instantly. Because they understand for their entire lives they were working on some sort of half understanding of a Savior non-existent. And if they wish to save themselves, their souls first, because they can teach of a Savior while then the speaker himself then is lost. These people are then involved then with a drag of these people down to the inferno. Shaliach Shaul, as we read in 2 Corinthians 12, you find very simply, he explains visions and revelations of the Messiah, of the Savior. Does it not say revelation there? Did he have some sort of understanding of revelation as we know at the end of the word? Precisely, this was receiving but sections of it. So then, Yohanan, he was in the first holy city. After he had set up the holy city as per instructions of Moses, then there was a completion of the spring feast. The whole situation was updated during his time, and he received a revelation. He received because he obeyed what was spoken. Shaliach Shaul, however, he did not have the privilege of being close to a holy city. He was receiving bits and pieces during a time where his people were then gathering. They were receiving understandings of the completion of the spring feast. And some of them, they did not even understand there was an autumn feast as far as the shadow prophetic events or the prophetic events yet coming. Most of them didn't understand. That's why then when the Savior came, they thought it was then the end. So then, with this understanding in mind, Let's combine these with visions of angels. There is no such. Never existed and won't exist as far as we understand outside of tabernacle or outside of the temple. It simply doesn't exist. People don't have visions of angels. Angels are always 100% related with tabernacling, or the first tabernacling service or the second tabernacling services. They are always related with these. Now, some people, they have the crazy understanding. Sometimes they sit and they have talk with angels, not speaking of tabernacling. What can you suspect? So then, what kind of gathering we understand as far as 2 Corinthians 12? He explains then as these gatherings. Gatherings simply means the Hebrews of the time, they were gathering around and they were making reference of the holy instructions, and they were listening of what Shaliach Shaul had said, and they felt the completion of the spring feast. Later on, some of these people, they were gathering around, forming a holy city, and then they received functions. As we understand, there are 7 functions. 7 spirits of Elohim. If you understand the Savior from the original manuscripts, every time he is then mixing the people, those who are then receiving these functions, with the Creator himself, always in the form of Elohim, the plural name of God because of his 7 spirits. Every time, read the holy instructions, read then the translations from the Hebrews. You always find a relation with the Gentiles and relation with his people, most importantly, regarding then the functions, always from the name Elohim. When we are speaking the Torah and the instructions in the temple or tabernacle, speaking of the Creator himself, then his name is Yahweh, the Creator of heaven and the earth. So then, as we read 2 Corinthians 12, then you find these gatherings as then his own people gathering around and understanding the completion of the spring feast found in Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. And then, later on, Yohanan, when we read in Hebrews 10, explain then the Torah is then the prophetic shadow events coming. Now let me ask you this. You begin to teach these layers of understanding to those people in those crazy establishments known as churches. Do you think are they going to be receptive? Do they want truly understanding trials and tribulations of many kinds on behalf of the true Savior? Ha! Not a chance. They want to enjoy this crazy and contaminated world. They want more money, more pleasure in their own lives, believing a Messiah or Savior outside of the Holy of Holies, no linking with tabernacling of any kind, living the way they want to live with the sin or not. And they don't understand when they read Luke chapter 1:7, they are speaking of themselves, and those people caught unawares because they did not understand the times and the seasons. And they were given relationships and having trade and so on and so forth, and then the time came and they were gone. Gave the example of Lot, Noah. And then further yet, try to make a person understand they should not go to those crazy establishments anymore. And then a step further, they should be concerned with a gathering on the 7th day, in the Shabbat. Then things get truly crazy. But as these steps must take place so they can save their own souls and produce fruit, do you think they're going to do this gladly? So then, Shaliach Shaul was not a lazy person. He was a worker. He was a tent maker. He was involved building tents. As people of the desert, they use tents there because rarely has rain. And he was a worker. So let's demystify another situation regarding pastors and teachers, that they should live in those crazy establishments and being paid by those idiots listening to their junk. There is no such. They must work. Shaliach Shaul has said, because if you work for the word, you live by the word. No, that's not what Shaliach Shaul has said. He said he had made a choice himself to work so they would understand he was not a burden. So he maintained what the Creator indicated. We must work, including those people. There are no exemptions from work. Dignitaries and such were invented because Samuel, during the time of Samuel the prophet, people want to have a king. That's where the whole problem started. The nation was not to be led by kings. They should be led by prophets. Mostly Israel at the time. So then, as we understand this section, we should be very clear as far as do you truly want to save your own soul? Not mine, not anybody else, but want to save yours. Later on, we're going to evaluate more of a revelation regarding with this topic as far as 2 Corinthians 12. And make a link with Shaliach Shaul, what he saw from this crazy person over there, and then Revelation. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.